just before we open it up to questions, I just want to reiterate, I mean, this is a kind of critical moment. A lot has happened in the last month or two. And keep in mind, I mean, John mentioned his role on the liaison committee for Juniper Ridge. But this is, you know, is publicly owned. I mean, despite this sort of lack of access we seem to have around what is being decided, and that we're all citizens, well, you know, most of us are citizens of Maine in the room, that, you know, Maine is a public institution. This is owned by the state of Maine. It's operated by Casella. But really, as a citizenry, we do have a lot of say over this. If we are, you know, the cost of citizenship, if that's where we see our values. So I would just say, like, it seems like the I don't know, whatever analogy you say, it's pretty far down the tracks here in terms of things that have happened recently that are kind of putting a real wedge and putting a real kind of momentum to this thing that might not be for the good of all of us. We can act, and I think that's sort of one of the stories that I would say if we as a citizenry can work together. So that's just my little 2 cents. You can all take my environmental justice class in the fall. So if you want to hear more of that. So the other questions? Yeah, right.
I understand at the end of last year, before the contract was signed with UM, that the Casella had requested from the DEP to expand. There was a request for expansion, and it was denied by DEP, saying, according to our original agreement, you won't reach that max for another 10 years. But that's what I understand was told, and they were denied the expansion before they even made the contract. Now that they've made that contract, they're going to need that expansion before the 20 of the contract for sure. Is that going to affect now that they could get the expansion? I mean, supposedly nothing else has changed except now they've invested in the pipeline for gas. So have they been assured in a way that, okay, if you do that, we'll give you the expansion?
I think so. I think that's their exact plan. And I'm glad that you highlighted that. What happens under state law for any entity that wants to establish or expand a waste dump, they have to go through a process of what's called public benefit determination. Mm-hmm. There's an analysis where they have to show that there is a positive benefit to the public for the expansion. Now, what had happened here back in 2003, when the resolve was passed to authorize the state of Maine to buy this dump, there was also laws amended that also said that any state-owned facility doesn't have to go through this public benefit determination process, which to me was crazy. I mean, you know, especially if it's publicly owned, it should have to show a public benefit before it can be expanded. So what we had to do is we had to go back to the legislature, and this was an initiative of the Landfill Liaison Committee, where we let folks know that you know, the public benefit determination wouldn't be required under existing law. So we got Representative Bob Duchesne involved, and he did sponsor a bill to change that law so that they would have to go through a public benefit determination. And that's what happened. They did their request for a public benefit determination, and the DEP denied that. You know, the DEP ruled that they couldn't show that it met that threshold under the public benefit determination because, like you said, for one reason, the need for additional capacity couldn't be demonstrated right now. So in terms of now that they have this agreement with the university for the pipeline and for the phase 2 for the cogen plant, it would be my guess that yes, that will pave the way for their new application for a public benefit determination for this landfill, because there's new things in the works now. I don't know if Paul wants to take that.
I think that's pretty close to the way it is.
Question over here. Yeah. I want to know who benefits from all this. I mean, okay, Casella obviously benefits, that's clear. But does Old Town benefit? Does the state benefit? Does UMaine benefit? In other words, does anybody make money? Does anybody get political power? What's behind all this expansion?
Okay, Old Town does get a tipping fee. And it amounts to, close, about $1 million a year. Okay, that the city of Old Town gets. So that's their incentive. Whether there's a public benefit from the $1 million is kind of an open question. In fact, if you go over to our airport, there's a beautiful, nice boulevard, well landscaped, leading into that airport. Well, that cost $1 million, and I question whether it was necessary, especially where the Public Works Department is right on that road. There are other state fees that the state actually gets, and those, I believe, are dedicated. Those are kind of a little, not secret, but they don't like talking about it much. And the revenues from that are dedicated to a certain number of positions at DEP and at the state planning office. One of the things we find happening that is kind of bothersome as any kind of a citizen, is a special citizen of Old Town, is they've got this kind of a loophole. Anything that they classify as fines for daily cover, they don't pay a tipping fee on, okay? So it's a situation where, let's just say, perhaps a building catches on fire in Massachusetts. They come knock it down, bring the refuse to this facility in Lewiston where it gets either sorted or just ground, and then it can come up here, and if you grind it fine enough, it could be classified as fines for daily cover. Well, Casella or whoever got paid a very large dollar to get rid of that stuff there, but by the time it gets to Old Town, it's supposedly, fines for daily cover, so there isn't any fee associated with it. I'm not sure if the state, how that works with the state's fees. And certainly Casella is just, I don't know, if you look at their stock price, they're not making money, but it's, if you do some calculations here, you can get it up to like $1 billion worth of potential profits for them. And I mean, for that much money, it's small surprise in this day and age that people would be willing to misrepresent and even outright lie to the public.
What about UMaine?
Well, the number they're using for UMaine is the 17 million over 20 years for the
savings?
Exchange. This is savings, yeah. So 17 million over 20 years. I mean, we can talk about that. I'm sure people. I mean, that's the one that's been repeated a lot in the press in terms of the benefit to the university.
Personally, I'm very skeptical because Casella has a long history of proposing projects like this that don't really pan out as well as they said they would. Like we're not hearing much about the gas to electricity project down in Hamden, but I hear it from everybody through the grapevine that it's not working as well as as nearly as well as what they projected. They've had problems with gas projects in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. Every place they go, it seems like they have arguments. So I'm skeptical whether Casella delivers the goods or not.
Yeah, I wanted to just add one point on the question of revenues. That I think that the state has missed a huge opportunity to benefit financially from this project. It's in place. It's under full operation. What is the state getting out of it? When this first was devised, the state got out of it its assistance to keep the mill open, and it involved $25 million, and approximately, and it had to do with transfer of ownership and installation of the power-saving boiler at the mill. That's where the $25 million. Well, what about that $25 million? The Casella gave it to the state. And this is my basic thumbnail sketch of it. Casella arranged that the state would get $25 million, as an upfront lease. Let's just call it that. Maybe technically it's not a lease, but an upfront lease for a 30-year contract. Okay, the state immediately turned over the $25 million to GP, which used the $25 million to hire Chinbro to dismantle a boiler in Athens, Maine, and bring it to Old Town where it's operating now. There were no provisions in this deal for any ongoing revenue for the state as the owner of this facility. So, like we would expect that if they were provident financially, they would have built something in, a revenue sharing, a lease, annual fee, something like that. And I have no idea like exactly what the fees are that go to the state. There are some fees, but the idea that this huge operation that's going to take probably 30 million cubic yards of garbage over the next 30 to 50 years is not generating by contract any direct revenue for the state, I think is a huge missed opportunity. Maybe it's one that this new legislature can take a look at.
Yeah, okay.
I think in the advertisement for this, there was something about living downstream from the Old Town dump. Did I read that correctly? I think. Are there implications for those of us who live on the river for this? Or?
I guess. Should I answer that, John, or you?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think there are. I mean, if you look around, I mean, they say all landfills leak eventually, and I don't feel real threatened right now, but we kind of don't know really. You know, DEP seems to say things are okay now. Most landfills that accept this waste are required by federal law to have a double liner system. This one only has a single one. How come? We haven't got a straight answer to that question. It's just because they can do it. The vision I have, you know, it's pretty. From being a landowner here, Old Town's pretty flat. Okay, the highest point in this town is 250 feet, except for the top of that landfill is at about 325 right now. So picture this pile of who knows what from who knows where that's poised, hanging over, you know, Old Town, Orono, the Penobscot Nation, and I actually we have a shallow well, and we are downstream. You know, we have property along Pushaw Stream, so I think I share your concerns, and you know, I think if we ever get a chance to speak at a public hearing, I think that should be right up there as leading questions.
Yeah, I think the residents should be very concerned about the future of this watershed becoming eventually poisoned by this landfill. You know, the name of it is Juniper Ridge, which is kind of almost an oxymoron in itself. If you're a forester, you know that juniper trees don't grow on ridges, they grow in swamps. And so this area where this thing was built is a swamp, and it is the headwaters to two tributaries, Birch Stream and Pushaw Stream, that both flow into the Penobscot River. And we're sitting on an island in the middle of the Penobscot. The Penobscot River flows on both sides of this island that we're on here right now, Marsh Island. And I want to, these guys reminded me of something also that I wanted to mention. You know, we talk about the company and the attorneys that were representing the company, that being Pierce Atwood, and how they're pretty much prosecutor, judge, jury in this whole thing. I mean, they have had their hand in writing the regulations. They had their hand in drafting the resolve for the state to buy this. And last session in the legislature at the Natural Resources Committee, there were several solid waste bills going through the process, going through the public hearing process. And so there was a lot of discussion that came up about this state-owned landfill, and there were some other landfills in the state that had some legislation in too. But what really, I think is really telling is that once this was explained to one particular member of the Natural Resources Committee, who happened to be a judge for 25 years, sitting on this committee, when he heard all of this, how this was set up, how Casella's really running it under the guise of the state, so it's really a state-sanctioned fox guard in the hen house again. And so this guy that had been a judge for 25 years, his comment was that he had never seen anything like this in his 25 years of hearing cases, on the bench. This was the craziest thing that he's ever heard. So.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, I'm also a former horse-drawn logger, and my mother-in-law lives next to Mount Hamden. Susan Collins' pet project seems to be to allow these trucks to carry 100K. Every study I've seen says a road is destroyed at about 10,000 times. The rate is about 10,000 times for a car. So I was wondering if one of the ways to fight this would be to make it uneconomic, namely make it so you can't bring those 100-ton trucks in. And if you're going to bring those 100 trucks in, it's got to be railed. I don't understand why we have to waste all this gas and there's no urgency that I know of to haul crap, waste from one place to another. So to me, it would be a way to fight it. And I would think that people are already upset about roads, talking about how much damage those trucks would do to our roads. Maybe you could fight it by just talking about what those trucks are doing to our roads and stop ruining our roads.
Well, I'll pick up on this one. I'm glad that you asked that question. The last week in the VDN op-ed, January 28th, a truck activist named Daphne Iser wrote, "Heavier trucks hazard to Maine roads and people." And I would suggest to everybody, please get a chance to take a look at that, look it up online. The truck issue has been a huge one for us. I personally have been involved in looking at the data around truck transport and trash now for several years. There are, like all things, there are many forces at work. What we hear in this issue, a couple of things we hear are, number one, this is about the natural resources-based economy of Maine, making us think that the trucks that we're really providing this access for are logging trucks. Well, they are logging trucks, but way beyond the logging trucks are the garbage trucks that are coming up from out of state, and you can see them on the highway. For a year, they were off of our local roads here in Orono and Old Town. Now they're back on those roads. The myth that's being circulated by our legislative delegation is that all of the rest of the country, and certainly their surroundings in New England, allows these heavy trucks, and it's just Maine who doesn't have it. It's sort of like we're being discriminated against. Well, if Maine were being discriminated against with these truck weights, Maine would go to federal court and file an interstate commerce lawsuit and demand that Maine have equal rights to the access to the highways just like every other state. Just like everything, it's more complicated. These truck weights are not uniformly 100,000 pounds. In fact, the national level is 80,000 pounds. When we tried to get Casella, in fact, this was discussed at a very early meeting in Brewer around Brewer's concerns with the trucks. Casella said, we can't change our sacred contract. We already have it. And going to 80,000-pound trucks would add $4 million a year to our transport costs.
Good.
Yeah. Well, and it would also employ more truckers. The bottom line is that this truck weight issue is part of, getting the toehold in on the federal government to get all of the United States' interstate weights bumped up to 100,000 pounds so that we're all going to be endangered in paying the cost of these heavier trucks. This is definitely an issue that people should be up to speed on.
Well, my brother-in-law is a trucker. He bitches all the time about the high taxes he has to pay to drive his trucks. But the higher taxes they pay don't anywhere near compensate for the damage a heavier vehicle does to a road than a lighter vehicle does to a road. And as I said, I would think that a good way of fighting this thing is to get people behind, somebody in, I don't know, Allagash doesn't give a damn about Old Town. But they do care about their roads. And to haul crap from Timbuktu to Maine and destroy our roads, that's costing him money. I mean, he pays taxes on those roads.
Yeah, I'm always amazed every time, and it's happened often, at how basically the administration of the university makes these deals, pushes them through, and doesn't get any feedback. And in particular, on this issue, from their own faculty. And we've seen a very similar story. I'm glad to see that Maine campus is here with the story about the millions of dollars worth of heat we're pumping out of several of our buildings on campus, just literally blowing it out into the atmosphere. They didn't consult the engineering faculty on how to build the heating systems. We haven't heard any input, or I haven't heard any input from any of our faculty on this issue, except I remember there was one quote of someone who wanted to remain anonymous in the engineering department who said, "I don't think it's a good idea." And so what I'm calling for is, first of all, for the administration to consult the experts in their own university. Most of the administrators are not engineers, environmental scientists, or anything else like that. They're administrators, business people. Consult the faculty, and I'm calling on the faculty to put their voice out there. We have faculty in every area surrounding this issue. Water quality people, geologists, transportation people, policy people, lawyers. Let them speak up and tell us, is this a good deal or not? What kind of effect is this going to have on our community? And, let's hear it.
Do we know what actually is going in, like what percentage of out-of-state trash is actually coming in, and what it's made of? Is there radioactive waste? Is it medical waste? I mean, are they required to tell us what's going in there? Is that public knowledge?
We get the landfill liaison committee gets reports of the numbers of trucks that go in there and the companies and so forth, but there is no analysis done on out-of-state waste versus in-state waste, and that's something we've been chasing and really trying to get a handle on, but it's virtually impossible to get a good handle on that, because what we talked about before, about how the definition of out-of-state waste, it could come in from anywhere, and once it gets processed in Maine, then it becomes, the definition by law deems it to be in-state waste.
I would say, to venture a hazard guess, if we used as a definition out-of-state waste as material that came across our borders without having any inherent value in it. In other words, someone was paid to bring it here instead of us paying to bring it. I think that pile out there has got to be 50% originated as some other states' citizens' waste. And this brings up one of the problems I have with this is that we rely so much on, in fact, entirely on Casella to provide us with the numbers, with the facts. There's nobody watching them, basically. Old Town has it in their contract. They could send somebody out, but no one seems to look. So even Ronald Reagan said, trust, but verify, And I think that's something that we've been pushing for, is just to have some more oversight, and just people, have someone, could be an accountant, just show up and say, what's this stuff, where's it from, let's prove it. Where's your bills of lading? But this gets incredibly complicated. Believe me, we've discussed it at length.
Sounds like your representatives aren't representing you.
Well, I'm having been a candidate for legislature from Old Town. I'm a lot more confident now. I think our current rep, he admits it's a steep learning curve, but I think we could get some results with him in office, whereas before it was, it just wasn't going to happen.
I'd like to speak about this idea of the liaison committee because I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Sounds like there are people that in Old Town that are able to somehow observe and things, but they can't make any decisions. I went to two of their meetings, and each time there was such frustration, and I finally had to ask somebody sitting next to me. I said, "Why don't they simply say they're going to the state and demand this, do that?" They said, "Well, if they do that, if they challenge anything, they submit some kind of an appeal or anything, all the money that they're earning, that $1 million a year, goes on hold." Is that correct? That means that it would cost the city something, especially if they lose the whole thing, they lose the money too. So there's a little trick there that was used for this so-called monitoring committee that makes the committee helpless.
Exactly.
Would you, Mr. Bates, would you answer to that? I know.
No, you're right. It's been extremely frustrating. The committee does not have any authority, and it's supposed to just be a liaison between the dump and the community. That was the way it was originally. The communities, 3 communities. That's the way it was originally set out. But we also, by statute, have the authority to review contracts and agreements. But there have been several amendments to those contracts and agreements, which we don't find out about them until after they've already been signed, like this one with the university. So it's frustrating on many fronts. I'm going to ask Ed to talk briefly about, I think you made an important point about, isn't there a clause in the host community agreement?
Right. So, in fact, this came up when, I should say, I don't mean to be too negative on Old Town. I think the city council has got some really good members in it, and I know myself, Mary Dolan, and a guy named Chuck Lighthizer had an appeal before the BEP on this treated biomedical waste, as well as Peter Dufour on behalf of the advisory council. And the city council was actually, I think they had their ear. They were considering possibly putting in an appeal themselves, not to just exclude it, but to limit it to, a fraction of what they wanted. And then they found out, someone mentioned, once again, this came from the audience, that in your host community agreement, you can't do that, because when that happens, if the city wants to appeal anything out there, then the income goes into an escrow account, and if the city loses, they lose the dough. All of it, not just the biomedical tipping fees, but the whole shoot match. So.
Yeah, just a comment and then a question. First, I wanted to thank you all for being so diligent in keeping abreast of all this. I know it's not an easy task. I've been following the issue for about 4 years now, and it's just incredibly complex. And oftentimes, I've attended the landfill liaison meetings, and you feel pretty futile. And also, John had commended the university for its efforts to find alternative energy. And I have a hard time doing that. I agree with what you said. And as an Institute of Higher Learning, I say shame on them for not considering the perspectives of the citizens. I'm a resident of Orono. I live right across the river. We have, 80,000-pound trash trucks zooming by my house on a daily basis. A couple nights ago, an 18-wheeler tipped over on Stillwater Avenue. Now, that's not to say it's a trash truck, but it could have been with biomedical waste. So there's a lot of concerns for the citizens in the area, and I'm really shocked and ashamed of the university for not considering the perspectives of the citizens. And I couldn't believe it when you open up the newspaper and you see, oh, wonderful news, the university is going to have alternative green energy. And like Paul said at the beginning, I think it was Paul at the beginning, that they haven't considered the effect, the carbon footprint of getting all that trash there. So that's my comment. And my question was, with the LePage administration in Augusta, I understand that he has a litany of environmental recommendations. Do any of those affect this situation at the landfill?
I noticed one right off because our appeal dealt with it. They want to exempt the providers of this biomedical waste from having to grind the sharps. That's the discarded hypodermic needles, etc. Currently, they have to grind them and mix them in with the other stuff. Now they don't want to do that. It's too onerous, to actually process them. So as far as the rest of them, if I can make a general comment on LePage, there are some rules and regulations. Anyone who's in business, even as small as me, there are some things that you could stand to change to speed things up and make things a little more equitable. But so many times when it comes to rules that affect the environment, these rules are only there because of bad behavior on the part of individuals, groups of individuals, or corporations. So if you have an irresponsible corporation, then you have to make rules to control them, and everybody else has to do the same thing. So if they really want to simplify one regulation, though, it could be that they could adapt the actual common sense definition of what out-of-state waste is. That would streamline things and save. They wouldn't have to spend so much time, fitting this into that loophole and this creative description for that stuff.
Yeah, something else.
Well, I was just going to, Ed mentioned this proposal by the LePage administration to do away with the regulation that requires that the company that processes biomedical waste, they're required now under state law to grind up what's called shards. Those are like hypodermic needles and scalpels and other metals that are used in the medical industry. Well, when we first found out that the company had submitted for an amendment to allow the dump to take biomedical waste, I started really looking into exactly what biomedical waste is and where it comes from and what are some of the potential paths for contamination if any of that stuff should be at the landfill where it could maybe be carried away by an animal or something like that. What's the potential vectors for medical problems or contamination? And what I found out was that in this process, that the company that processes the biomedical waste, they have this grinding process to grind up, because they're required now in the law to grind up the hypodermic needles and shards. And that because of the nature of the metals that are used in the medical industry, they often have mechanical breakdowns. So stuff doesn't always get ground up. So that was one of our concerns with biomedical waste coming to the dump. Now, the state's proposing to not even have to grind them at all.
Yeah, I'd like to just respond to Marie's comment about the university. Sometime recently, there was a quotation from someone speaking for the university, quoted in the news, that something like, well, we're a public institution, so we really have to, we're doing our responsibility by looking at the bottom line, by making sure we get the best deal possible out there. But my reaction to that is, anyone has to look at the bottom line. Whether you're a public university or a private university or a private corporation, you have to try to go and get the best deal that you can. That's nothing unique to the university. What I think should be unique to the university is that they actually have some awareness and openness and process by which issues like this can be fully discussed openly in public, and that everybody can have a role in how they get made. And that's the point that I think the university really is falling down on here.
Yeah, I think processes are really important. Always in these struggles that are environmental justice, it's always the tail wagging the dog kind of thing. Yeah.
I just want to emphasize that the danger to us is not just that we're living downstream and there might be a danger in the future. There's been a danger in the past and there's a danger in the present right now, and I just want to address that and also bring into light one population that we're not really talking about, which is the students. So the danger in the past, I'm going to tell a personal anecdote. My father had 10 siblings. He grew up in Maine, on the rivers in Maine, in Mexico, in Lewiston, and all the places where there were paper and pulp mills. And every single one of the members of his family died of cancer, including my father when he was 42 years old. One of them got cancer and survived. His wife was actually a medical oncologist, and she caught it early and he managed to survive. Everyone else died prematurely from growing up along the paper mill towns in the state of Maine. If you look at the statistics for the cancer rates, they're also off the charts in these environments. That's the past. Now, we're talking about paper and pulp waste, and this is a little bit different. There's a different kind of waste that's coming in, which is construction waste, but we're still dealing with waste issues that our culture produces that are highly toxic, that we have all kinds of records about. So let's move forward to the present time. I have a friend who is a doctor right now who lives along the river in Hamden, and who now has stage 4 cancer. And he's fighting that with carcinogenic drugs, which are part of the medical industry, which are going into the biomedical waste that we're having to deal with when we burn up. So the whole cycle is toxic. When I was living in New York City 10 years before coming here, I lived in New York City for 10 years in a place that was supposedly polluted. And I knew one person personally who had cancer in my sort of circle of friends. After I moved to Maine, within the first 6 months that I was here, I knew 5 people that I knew on a face-to-face basis with cancer. Now, these were adults, and that was a little bit shocking to me. And then another story, I moved to Orono when I first got here. And for the first 3 months that I was here, I had headaches, terrible headaches. And so I started asking around to people who live here, what's going on? And they told me it was like without a hesitation, on what days, and it's because the wind is blowing from the mill in Old Town.
And they're captains from the mill.
Exactly. So, okay, so I'm having headaches. People in my family are dying. My friends are dying. That's really terrible. This is the past and the present. But I want to talk about the future, too, because I have students now, young people with cancer. I have students with cancer, a whole handful of them, who come to me with kerchiefs because they don't have hair on their heads. These are the young people. It's not the past. It's our kids. And I don't know how much money Old Town is getting for this, but our kids are dying. This is the Starship University of the state, and we are sending our kids to a toxic place because we need money. Now that is really shameful. It is not just about consulting faculty, but about creating a toxic environment where our children are being educated. And not only that, but they don't even know. The parents who are sending their kids here don't even know they're paying high taxes for a public university in a toxic site, because nobody can talk about this on campus because of the ties the university has to the industry there, and because the kind of money that the state is making on us and the kind of money our communities are making on it. So we are really in trouble when our children are at risk because we don't have an alternative. So it's a present danger, and it's an immediate danger, and it's a serious danger, and it's downstream right now. So that's the first thing that I want to make very clear. My students are dying. Okay? The second thing is, one of the major alternatives we have to this is a long-term one, and I don't know the answer to this, but I think if a number of us get together, we might be able to find one. There is a project called AMD in Art that was done in Vintondale, Pennsylvania. The story there is not so different from here. It's a mining town. The mine owned the whole community, right? And so, first of all, they went in, they trashed it, they destroyed it, they provided labor, and then, surprisingly, as this story tells us, they left. And they left their whole mess behind, and the community didn't even want them to leave because they had no banks, they had no grocery stores, they had nothing without the company. They were suddenly on their own. So what happened in Vintondale, Pennsylvania is an artist came in and started some community organizing around alternative economies and around beautifying the site and about getting grants to actually produce an environment and an economy that worked, bringing the people and the community back together. But it was a community-based effort. And the lesson of that is that it takes a whole community to come up with an alternative to whatever economic benefit we're getting from this Old Town plant. And I certainly don't have the answer, but I would really welcome the community, and I'm sure that there are discussions already on site, but why aren't the university students and the faculty involved in coming up with this alternative economic model that we don't have to sell our children and ourselves to corporations to feed us the money that we need to survive? How can we figure out how to get our own survival with the resources that we have. How do we get to that place? And there are models for doing this, and we do have resources at the university for doing this. So how do we get started with that alternative? How do we save our kids? And how do we get the parents, the alumni network, the funders to realize the kind of issue that we're dealing with in a toxic environment? How do we address that and bring the full conversation, the parents, the community, the young people, into the conversation? Because there are solutions, and we need to get to them. So thank you so much for keeping me this along.
You guys had a response to that? But
My response was, you should have been sitting up here instead of me.
Thank you all for coming. This is an ongoing discussion, right?